Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of An Autumn War by Daniel Abraham. This is the third book in the Long Price Quartet, and boy oh boy, Daniel Abraham is an excellent writer. He's excellent at developing plot, he's excellent at developing characters, and I was very impressed by how much intent he has with his story, and I loved it. I really liked it. And without further ado, I'm going to jump into what it was that I loved about it so much. The thing that Abraham does really well, exceptionally well, compared to most other authors that I have read, is how choices matter. Choices are important. The choices that our characters make in books 1 and 2, especially in books 1, how they impact book 3 and the consequences of those actions. It's how the smallest little decision, which may not seem particularly impactful in that moment, how that very small thing, how that little choice that one of the characters has made in that moment has lasting, disastrous, catastrophic impact on the plot and the rest of the characters and the world that has been built by Abraham. The way that he tracks back certain decision points to books 1 and 2, it just shows to me that he's a very intentful author. I like authors who have clearly really thought about their plot and their characters and how these two things interrelate. And it's very obvious that Abraham is someone who does that. And it's very obvious that Abraham has had the big picture in his mind since book 1. And I love it. I'm here for it. And I cannot wait to see how events continue to transpire in book 4 and ultimately how it resolves itself. The second thing that I really liked is obviously his characters. We've been with his characters now, for the course of 3 books. The books are, kind of 15 years apart, kind of 10 to 15 years apart. And so we have seen these characters grow. In book 3, the characters are kind of in their mid-40s, if I remember correctly. I just started book 4 recently and they're in their 60s, so they would have been in their kind of mid-40s. We are seeing how they have changed and how they haven't changed as well. I think that's one of the things that I find really interesting is how the characters have had growth and how they have been elevated to certain positions in society, but how they are still at the core very much themselves and the people that we saw in book 1. Ota is a perfect example of this. Marty is a perfect example of this. Ota is still trying to run away from responsibility. He still doesn't want to accept the fact that he is a leader and that people respect him. And he has this insecurity about that, which is fascinating to read. And then Ota is still trying to prove himself. He's still trying to prove that he has worth and that he is talented and that he can do what he needs to do. But we're seeing that insecurity of whether he can actually do it. And the outcome of book 3 is just phenomenal because we learn some things about these two characters in particular that make this story so rich and just make you want to pick up book 4 straight away, which is exactly what I did. The other thing I will mention about Ota, because Ota is still to this day my favorite character out of the lot, is how he contrasts with a new character that gets brought into this book, and that is the main antagonist of this book, and that is Balasar. Balasar Geiss is a military commander, and he is essentially somebody who is anti-poet, anti-Andat. He is basically anti-anything that allows cities and empires to have more power over other people. And I really liked how his leadership style and his personality contrasted quite starkly with Ota. Balasar is very confident, overly confident, maybe you could argue, and he's very self-assured and thinks, he's going to be the one that's going to be bringing in revolution and changing the world. He thinks he's owed respect, whereas you look at Ota, who in this book is the Kai Marchi, and he arguably has a right to have respect because he is the Kai. And yet here he is a character who's very conflicted about his responsibility and the weight that he carries on his shoulders. And it's just fascinating to see the two of them because there's this one who is on one side of the spectrum who's overconfident, thinks he's owed things, thinks he's owed respect, I think. And then you have Ota, who's arguably owed respect because he is Kai, and he is battling with his insecurity about whether he is actually owed that. And so when you have these two leaders kind of side by side, it just led to some really interesting thoughts of my own on what it means to be a good leader and what it means to kind of have self-respect for yourself in that regard. So I love that. And Ota's character development and Marty's character development were fantastic in this book. On the topic of characters, Kian and Liat were also two characters that I just adored. The thing that I really adored about them was their friendship. I think Abraham, not only does he write women extremely well, he writes female friendships extremely well. It would have been very easy for him to pit these two women against each other given the history and the context of the previous books. But instead, he turned that on its head and he made an incredibly beautiful female friendship that I loved. And it was great. I was here for it. In my previous reviews, I have mentioned how pacing could be a little bit of an issue for some people. While I do not think these books are for everyone, and they are not, because they are very character driven, they're very nuanced. I think Abraham really excels in nuance and details. And if you're somebody who just, doesn't really pay attention to those things, then I don't think these books are for you. I do think you also have to be kind of in the right reading frame of mind. I don't know, for me, I definitely had to be in a specific frame of mind to read these books because there's not tons of action. And so what you're really here for is these kind of quiet character interactions and how I'm basically trying to connect how different dots and how different pieces of the puzzle fit together. And for me, the pacing in this one was perfect. I really think the book starts with a bang. Abraham does a great job of his prologues where he really sets the scene for the book. And the prologue for this one was my favorite so far. I really loved how he introduced the kind of core plot of this one. And then our antagonist, Balasar. And I had to kind of just keep reading ahead because I was just so curious as to what was going to happen. Pacing was perfect. I think the ending was done well, the middle was done well, the beginning was done well, everything was done well. And I do think this book is his most well-paced book to date that I've read. The other thing that I will also say is I think his writing in this one, I wouldn't say he's necessarily improved as a writer, but something just clicked for me in this book. And maybe it was just the plot and the pacing. Maybe it was just that as well. But I just felt like something really clicked for me with his writing in this book. I felt like it flowed a lot better for me. It was just really beautifully written and beautifully crafted. And there were two chapters in particular that really impacted me. I'm not going to go into which chapters they were or why, because I want to keep this spoiler free. But there was one particular chapter towards the end of the book that really kind of hit me in the gut, and I got very emotional reading it because, again, it was just about friendships and family and loss, and just the discussion points in that chapter are just very real. And I feel like if you've ever felt any loss, you'll be able to relate to certain conversation points in that chapter. And then there is another chapter before that chapter where we are with Marty and Ota. And essentially the book kind of hits its crescendo at that point. So if you've read this, you will probably know what I'm talking about. And you just learn certain things about the characters that just make the story feel quite tragic. It's quite a tragic story. And you learn certain things that really make you feel for certain people. And it was just wonderfully done. Wonderfully, wonderfully done. The last thing I will mention actually was how I love the kind of theme of like parent-child relationships in this one. Ota has a daughter and a son, Marty has his son, and I just really loved the way, I don't want to say too much about it because I think it's something that you should experience for yourself, but I really loved seeing these characters older and how their relationships and their past have influenced their parenting abilities, essentially. I just loved it. I think once I've read the fourth book, I'm going to do maybe a series review of the entire series, and I will probably do that entirely with spoilers. And the parental-child relationships is something that I want to talk about because I thought it was just done really well, and it was really beautiful to read, and it felt very relatable. So thumbs up for that as well, Abraham. In terms of like negatives, I honestly don't really have anything negative to say about this book. There was one thing I would maybe say about Balasar, the antagonist. I do think to a small degree, maybe his character motivations weren't really that well rooted, but I still bought into them, and so that's why it wasn't really a big gripe for me. I really just liked his character and the way that he presented himself and the contrast that he provided to Ota. But I did think maybe it was a little bit surface level and we could have gone a layer deeper into his motivations and why he was doing the things that he was doing. And then, you know, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is these books are slow. Even when they're fast-paced, they still read quite slow, and that's just because of the way that Abraham writes. I really like it. His specialty, in my opinion, and his real strength is nuance and detail and really bringing plot pieces together in a really subtle way. If that's not something that you like, and if you're just somebody who doesn't really pay attention to detail, then I just would not recommend these books. Otherwise, I think this series has been a really pleasant surprise so far. At the time of the recording of this video, and probably by the time that I put it up, I will have finished book 4, but I'm just started book 4 recently and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm loving it so much, and I can't wait to see what happens at the end of this wonderful quartet. I ended up giving this book a 5 stars. I rated the first book 4.5, the second book 4.75, and then this one 5 stars. A very easy 5 stars for me. I just thought it was wonderful how certain things culminated together at the end of this book, and I just love the character growth. I do feel like I'm probably going to end up bumping up his previous books as well, just because of how intentional those books are. But I would definitely review those ratings at the end of my journey with the Long Price Quartet. So there we go, I'm going to leave it. I know quite a few people have been reading this book or have read this book who watch my videos, so let me know how this one stacked up for you compared to the others and just kind of what your general thoughts are on it. And I will see you all in the next video, folks. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Every little helps. Otherwise, stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.